Hi, I'm very delighted to welcome you all to the first student panel of this conference. So our two speakers will be Eche Ghanianisms, and then I'd also like to introduce Kingsley, who will be presenting on Ghanianisms, Nigerianisms, and Afrobeats sonic aesthetics. He is a composer, arranger, and researcher currently pursuing a PhD in ethnomusicology at the University of Pennsylvania. His research investigates problems that arise in intra-Africa regional musical exchanges, the non-musical impacts and or implications of West African studio musicking, African and Afro-diasporic musical circulations, and creative musicology. He holds a Master of Arts in Music in Ethnomusicology from the University of Florida and a Bachelor of Arts in Music with a minor in practice from the University of Ghana. You did not add a blurb about yourself like you did, so I'm trying to say, please someone give me a word. We have intent and captivating. Okay, so I hope this
So my paper is titled Ghanianisms, Nigerianisms, and Afrobeats sonic aesthetics. There's a lot to unpack here, and of course, for those that are very familiar with the nations of Ghana and Nigeria, we have like long-standing rivalry in so many things, in pop culture, in cuisine, in a lot of things. Even we have political histories, shared colonial experiences, and so this focuses on Afrobeats, its sonic aesthetics, and the contributions that both Ghanaians and Nigerians have given to what I call a genre conceit, and I'll explain what that is later. All right. So a post I chanced on in October 2022 on my X, that's formerly Twitter feed, read, Ghana's biggest export to Nigeria is Odoyewu. And Odoyewu is Akan for, it literally means love is dead. And when you say Odoyewu, you say it to your lover, you're trying to say that like, till death do us part, kind of like a deeper kind of love, right? And a lot of Nigerian musicians have been using this word in their music. And that's why this person tweeted that this is Ghana's biggest export to Nigeria. Often humorous posts like those in Ghanaian and Nigerian X-Feeds elicit responses ranging from bemusement to banter as opposed to the not so light-hearted ones that often start with banter until they garner mixed reactions ranging from consensus to vitriol. In the morass of arguments and proofs, topics ranging from Afrobeats origin to influence dominate. And so I focus here on some aspects of Ghanaian and Nigerian music that are clear influences from both countries on each other's sound. So why am I in this rigmarole? My siblings were born in Nigeria and spent their formative years there. My oldest brother still celebrates the Nigerian independence every October. My father's unintentional code switching between Twi and Nigerian Pidgin many years since resettling in Ghana was a testament to his immersion in the country he had made home some decades prior when he worked in Lagos. Music from both countries was celebrated in our home, from secular to sacred, and I'm reminded of my mother's Yoruba hymn books. And my parents would recount tales of their experiences there. There's a proliferation of Nigerian acts in the Afrobeats industry, pivoting on a more robust entertainment system compared to their Ghanaian counterparts. Many attribute this dominance to originality and influence, while the opposing section, often Ghanaians, argue that Ghanaian music has largely shaped the movement's sonic aesthetics. Last year, I came across a change.org petition that advocated for a retraction of Ayo Sholaya's statement that the foundation of Afrobeats is Ghana. While I recognize the apparent misunderstanding of the filmmaker's statement that fueled some Nigerians to confront what seemed like a travesty-like rendering of their history, the source of this rage is multiple. First, many confuse Afrobeats without the S with Afrobeats with the S. Right? Fela Kuti did set a foundation by inventing Afrobeat without the S, epitomizing the idea of social commentary and the merging of styles, which we see happening in Afrobeats with the S. However, the revolutionary musician did not coin the term Afrobeats with the S, which Eche was talking about earlier. That Fela took inspiration from highlife while in Ghana has been a reason some Ghanaians also lay claims to the origins of Afrobeat or Afrobeats, to hear both. When Ghanaian British DJ Abrantia coined the Afrobeats term, the music which mainly consisted of Ghanaian and Nigerian music, that he featured on his show already existed under different genre names, right? Yet, ever since it subsumed music from both places under the term's shade, and its use began gaining traction, music that began to consider itself Afrobeats have slowly been standardizing into similar characteristics that make them less different from one another every year. And so there is a standardization that keeps happening, and contributions from both countries keep making these things standardized. And so I'll try to define Afrobeats here for us to understand. These were the comparisons that I was making before. While noting the complexity of genres in their ability to express value, to capture or liberate musicians, and even to go to the extent of categorizing people, David Brackett also notes artists' increasing proclivity to non-categorization, whether of themselves or of their music. And so in the case of the two nations that I discussed here, this has been partly for the musicians' marketability in struggling economies and the propensity of artists to self-title their genres. And so you see a lot of Afrobeats artists self-titling their genres. And so now that American award schemes recognize the Afrobeats term, they still consider it like an umbrella term that they can all find some solace under. And so I propose 3 frameworks for understanding the Afrobeats phenomenon. The 3 include its understanding as first, reimaginations of other popular music styles, both African and non-African, within African sonic contexts. The second, a continuation of those same distinct genres that already existed and are participated in by African musicians. And third, newly created genres by contemporary West African artists. The term Afrobeats created a container to be filled by many genres that existed already and have successfully become a means of marketing them outside of the places they were created, much like a realization of DJ Abrantier's dreams when he played the music to a primarily UK audience. And so these are some of the characteristics of Afrobeats that I've been able to, through years of listening, outline. Mainly towards pleasurable beats and lyrics, even if the lyrics are supposed to be sad, like sometimes you still find the beats making you want to dance, right? They use claves or timelines, and these timelines are either altered or mixed. And for those that don't know timelines, when you hear beats like this, you hear it in Afrobeats a lot. And it was the same timeline which the Afro-Cubans call clave, which Bo Diddley, American musician Bo Diddley, turned into his Bo Diddley beats, which influenced rock and roll, and so had the Beatles, the Animals, all of them using the same timeline. It is one of the most ubiquitous rhythms in the world right now, from EDM to hip hop to whatever. Everyone uses those kind of timelines. They use West African pidgin and local languages, and you hear traits of highlife, Afrobeats, Juju, Apala, R&B, house, multiple genres. And then one other thing too that I describe as part of the Afrobeats aesthetic is it's sonically promiscuous, and I borrowed this from Kofi Agawu as one characteristic of popular music, and it indexes trending genres. So sometimes you hear Afrobeats songs imitating Amapiano or several other genres that already existed. And so I'll play some examples here that demonstrates the mixture of timelines. So you can see that it's altered, ta, 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 right? And then you hear the bossa nova clave as well. And here you have a combination of the Sichi rhythm, which I'll explain later, and then the son clave again. All right, and then there's an influence of Juju and Apala, Ashake, which he mentions earlier, combines music from those genres. All right, so this is what I term a genre composite. I have these concentric lines here to explain what I put here as a genre composite. I define a genre composite as a musical phenomenon with inconsistent sonic characteristics that imitate existing genres while hinging on a perceived or accepted sociocultural identity or theme. By hinging on an identity, a genre composite may act as an agent for a chosen cause or may reinvent itself for purposeful activism. And that's what Afrobeats has been doing all this while. It keeps reinventing itself for purposeful artism, and it is a constellation of many genres. And so I place a genre composite outside of the concentric circles as the main thing, which subsumes genres and styles. And other scholars might also conceive of style as something that can be inside and also outside of genre. And so I'll talk briefly about the politics of ownership. Despite its nuances, my position on the politics of ownership advocates for a basic understanding first, before any furthering of the argument. I argue that ownership is settled at the level of creation and not simply influence. Influence deserves recognition and sometimes origin, but influence may not trump creation. We only invoke due pain when we can clearly trace influence. The current proliferation of genres and the world's exposure to multiple cultures through the internet means that the concept of genre will continue to complicate as more musicians and listeners alike become omnivorous. The high life card that Ghanaians like to play when claiming origins is only justified in the instances where many of Afrobeats' sonic manifestations display its high life parts in its promiscuity. Scholars like Jesse Shipley, who I've been mentioning a lot, and John Collins attest to the big band high life and palm wine high life origins in Ghana. But there has been an ongoing interaction with Nigeria since, where newer forms were created. Those various interactions brought about traditional iterations of what makes up high life at different stages of the genre spread across West Africa. And so, like in Igbo land, like when a lot of Ghanaians migrated to southeastern Nigeria or eastern Nigeria, they influenced the Igbos there for them to create their own Igbo high life, which were like traditional iterations of their own version that can be separated from Ghanaian high life, but at the same time can be recognized as a distinct genre on its own. So what are the influences I talk about? Jesse Shipley chronicles some of these cultural and political interactions in his article, Parody After Identity. And one of the things he mentions in relation to hip life, which was a genre that combined high life with hip hop from the late 1990s to early 2000s Ghana. He talks about how some of the interactions have happened before. And during my research, I also realized that these interactions are not new. It's just that because of social media, we see them more often. Even during the times of E.T. Mensah, who was one of the pioneers of Ghanaian high life, there were some interactions that happened between Ghanaian musicians and Nigerian musicians. And some of the feuds and the beef that we see right now, they already happened before. I found an audio where he was complaining that a group of Nigerian musicians had come together to ban his music from there because he was becoming too popular. And recently, also, there were a group of Ghanaian musicians that came together and said, play Ghana music. And some Nigerian musicians interpreted that as also a banning of Ghanaian music. So these are like things that keep happening more and more. I'll supplement his work by mentioning some earlier signs of interaction between both countries. And so my first example by the Canados Superstars of Ghana is from their song Enowako Hene, released in 1982. And in this example, you hear some use of Igbo words in his music. So what is a Ghanaian doing saying now people, and these things were also mainly made popular through Nigerian movies, and all these expressions that they use, throughout. Like I have Kenyan friends back in Florida who still use those kind of expressions, and everyone recognizes that these are Nigerian, expressions that people use. Yeah. So the Canada Superstars from Ghana were based in Nigeria in the 1980s, being one of only the many Ghanaian bands that were either residing and playing there or commuting back and forth, that they had to add from Ghana, right, to their name should suggest some transnational commute, They had to distinguish themselves from other musicians that were there, right? Fine Woman, the album from which comes the track in discussion, was released in 1982, a year before the famed Ghana Must Go incident happened. So Ghana Must Go was an incident in the 1980s where there was an order from the Nigerian government that illegal migrants living in the country should go back to their home countries, right? I won't delve deep into it. I could talk about this on and on. In 1969, an earlier incident had happened in Ghana too, where Ghana had also instructed illegal aliens to leave Ghana. So some people thought this was a retaliation because most of the people that were affected were Ghanaians. Yeah. Between 2005 and 2009, it was not uncommon to hear Ghanaian gospel feature some of the sonic and linguistic markers of Nigeria. And there are two very good examples, but I'll play one here. Now, in contemporary times, some examples include Olive the Boys Good Sing, which was released last year, which has been thought of as Nigerian for two apparent reasons. First, the musician uses recent Nigerian popular linguistic and sonic elements, such as melismatic singing and local words or slangs like she, right, or abi, you know. And melismatic singing is when you have one syllable in a word, but with different notes in the melody. So, which we hear in Middle Eastern music a lot and in Indian Carnatic singing. And so this is Olive the Boys Good Sing, and this is Christian Labs moving forward. I'll play both examples.
I do more than every day. I need to like I need you. Oh no, loving you, girl, you get the pom pom che. You can know how I want the pom pom che. Oh, I need you like I need you. But no, somebody don't come right over. Got it to you,
Because you are in my world. And that's very common in Apala and Juju music, where they use melismatic singing, and also music from northern Nigeria, which has a lot of Islamic influence. And so I'll play Christian Lab's example as well. And in Christian Lab's example, there are two, both the linguistic markers and the sonic markers. The sonic markers, the Igbo timer. You can hear it in combination with different other percussion instruments. And then the sonic linguistic markers, you can hear she used abi, you know, ewo, you know, those kind of, yeah. Even the kind of pigeon she's using here is a specific Nigerian brand of pigeon, right? Ghana has their pigeon, but this is like a specific Nigerian brand. And the way she has tied her hair, you know, I remember during that time I was growing up in Ghana, there was like a trend where lots of Ghanaian women were, you know, putting on gele, you know, all these Nigerian things. All right, so now to Ghanianisms in Nigeria. So what follows is a single approach to address a double need. Even though I show Sichi to be a rhythmic Ghanaian identity, and Sichi is a rhythm that is based on a series of examples that I'm going to show before I conclude. I also show why it creeps into Nigerian sonorities almost unnoticed, and why it appears in both old and contemporary musics of both nations. It is important when tracing stylistic change and influence, especially when largely stemming from timeline rhythms that tend to be ubiquitous, to look at instances where those rhythms appear altered or mixed with other rhythms. What I've observed, especially with the technological revolution in Ghanaian music since the age of burger high life, has been the constant altering of timeline rhythms to make them more interesting. The role of the studio producer ever since production tools became more sophisticated has included music in potency, which like much now than ever before, right? The lines between DJ creativity and studio producer overseership keeps blurring. The Sichi rhythm has been combined in many ways that make it easily subtle in appearance if one does not have a listening history of the genres within which they appear. And so for the examples that I'll play here, I don't expect you to agree with me or to readily notice or hear the influence that I talk about, but I hope that that happens. And so I'll play these two examples for you to hear. So this is the traditional Ashanti dance music. It's called Sichi, which became very influential in Ghanaian music, and now it appears in several forms. And I hear it from time to time in a lot of Ghanaian and Nigerian music. But I don't know if these artists are even aware that these things are happening. So let me play these examples for you. One, two, three, five. So to make it easier, just look at the numbers where the onset of 7, 11, 15, right? And then the response, and the song clapping happens in other direction. 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now let's listen to Namoni by Davido, the Cavemen, and Angelique Kidjo. Well, let's just know where the song is. 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. You get a clear influence, right? All right, I have 2 more examples on the Sichi rhythm. Here you have Runtown, Smile Over You. And Runtown was one musician that many Nigerian Afrobeats artists credit as one person that revolutionized modern Afrobeats because he slowed down the tempos of the music. But that slowing down had already been happening in hip life a long time ago before Runtown came. And so Runtown, like Mr. Easy, was crediting the Ghanaian aesthetic, hip life aesthetic, as being a revolutionizing factor for modern Afrobeats, as something that really contributed to it. And so in Runtown, Smile Over You, he does not play the Sichi rhythm with a percussive instrument. He rather lets it appear as a melody. And this is one reason why it can be easy to miss the influence of the Sichi rhythm. So let's listen to it. All right, now in Fireboy's example, the Sichi rhythm does not appear on a percussive instrument, it instead appears on a tone drum. And now let's listen to that as well. All right. Let's call a spade a spade. There is no nation whose culture is impermeable now, given the constant interactions that have currently been expedited by the internet and the accessibility it brings. Despite lying 2 francophone countries away from each other, Ghana and Nigeria continue to engage in a cultural exchange that is perhaps unprecedented in the geographic region, given the distance. There's a slow standardization, and I say it again, in Afrobeats that keeps getting interrupted by its own mechanisms for survival, its eclecticism. Perhaps the platitude that a rolling stone gathers no moss half captures it. But this eclecticism is often intentional, reverting to genre composites' ability to reinvent itself for purposeful activism, which I mentioned earlier. Several songs existed under different genre categories before British Ghanaian DJ Abrantier's coinage of the term Afrobeats. A proliferation of works that privilege the terms used does not deny those genres that still exist in Ghana and Nigeria. An acknowledgement of similarities does not take from the contributions from each country. To me, Afrobeats represents the fact that the transnationality and or the transregionality of genre composites cannot be avoided, especially in the current age of rapid digital mediation. And perhaps one more thing it shows us is that Odoyewu is not Ghana's biggest export to Nigeria. Thank you.